All right, test 1 2 1 2. We've moved over to my favorite little mountainside. I ate all the soup, but I also wanted to walk you guys through an exercise. So this week, my sprint group is working on issues, trying to build some sort of solution that will help the trans community of color find mental health resources. And I want to walk you through how I go from idea in a very general space to product and solution. I feel like it's taking me some time to get into my flow to understand how I do it, but I'm just going to show you guys. So first I had a call with my team, right? We had another call today for an hour and a half, but we had one that was a few days ago where we just mapped out as much as we know about the problem, and a lot of the stuff we really don't know. I talked on the other call about what I know from, feeding the homeless in those tent encampments and building that table, right? But that's not even a ton. That's just that some trans people in the Bay Area are living in tent encampments. But I have this piece of paper here with a bunch of really messy notes, and I'm gonna show you how I go from this to something a bit more concrete. We went over stakeholder mapping yesterday, but we haven't made an actual stakeholder map for the trans community because we haven't actually interviewed anyone in the trans community. We interviewed someone working on food access and someone else working in the arts community, and both of these people were in the Bronx. And I'm familiar with trans people in the Bay Area. I do feel like that's a very different group of people, but some of them may have different layers. Now, also some of the insights that I got here, well, you can see this is kind of another example of where I might go from something like this, or I don't know why I have a bunch of math formulas here, but I have some some UX boxes here. I might get there, or a little bit more mapping and wireframing. That's what I typically use this notebook for, but we're gonna take this and build out a little bit more. So I also brought so this is my gel pen bag and my very special Daiso pen with all the different colors. This is special. And my gel pens. So we're gonna do this. I might make this video a faster speed in the future, but I'm just gonna leave these out and show you how I might start mapping them out. Let's use blue to start with. All right, so one thing that was noted in our conversation is that there are many layers before support. And so basically, let's start by titling this. So we're talking about mental health, in the trans community. Now, from a working document that I created, this is just a Google Doc with a bunch of separate fields for orgs and resources in different spaces. I've already mapped out, and we brought this to our entire team, not just the ones working on this particular sprint with us, but what are there any other organizations that you guys know who are working in the space? And we're going to try to get some of those organizations to come and talk to us in a focus group. So that's one thing. But also, what about the thing that's interesting about the trans community, at least, oh, that's a B. Oh God, get off, move. So some things that I know about the trans community, and this has been reaffirmed to me by other members of the trans community, that if you are a member of the trans community, all of the issues in society, especially if you're, and we're focusing particularly on people of color, but it's all the societal issues around poverty and lack of access, they fall on your community. So this is why I saw so many of those members like living in the tents, you know, in Oakland, right? It's like, because this community they're dealing, it's like all the societal issues of like housing and access, lack of food access, lack of, you know, general support, meaningful relationships, familial support. Like, what if you get cut off from your family because they find out that you're trans, and they no longer want to support you? So some of those issues, like, I'm gonna write down. So let's just put them in different colors. So like, let's say like lack of stable housing as one. I think since we're focusing primarily on mental health, that one of the most important issues is like a lack of meaningful connections. And it's really like a lack of meaningful connections or community, right? Because like, if you know someone, but that person doesn't really care about like what you're going through, like for instance, in the episode of Grownish that I was talking about that explored mental health and depersonalization, the character, I think it's Aaron, there was a kid in the dorm room who like he made a tweet or something that was basically like, I'm about to commit suicide. Now, Aaron saw the tweet on the timeline, but he scrolled past it to watch a cat video or something. And then somebody else saw the tweet, and they immediately called 911 and had the emergency people like go out to this guy's home, and they ended up like saving his life, right? But Aaron ended up feeling super bad about everything that happened because he realized he could have been part of the solution, but instead he watched the cat video. And so just because like you know someone, like those people were connected on Twitter and they saw something going wrong, but they didn't like actually they didn't take any action. Like Aaron didn't reach out to the kid to be like, oh my God, how can I help you? Or he like literally, Aaron is the RA for that whole dorm community. He could have like walked over and said something, but he didn't. And so I think this might be really evident in the trans community. Like maybe members they have like friends, like associates, people they might hang out with, people maybe like they feel comfortable doing drugs with or something. But if you're actually going through something, if you are mentally in a sad place, can you actually reach out to your friends to talk to them about it? Do they have constructive things to say about those issues? Like, do they even have resources to provide you with emotional support that you feel that you might really need? Sometimes the answer to that is no, and that's like something that's really hard to like come to terms with. It's like you might have friends who like hypothetically want to be there for you, but like really they can't, because they're not like emotionally mature enough to be there for you either, or maybe they don't have like the context. Like for instance, I never really talked to like I have some women who are like older than me by like 10 years, right, that are my friends, who I might talk to you about like my relationship with my ex Alvin. But most of my friends, like I couldn't talk to them about my relationship with Alvin, because that situation for me was basically like a marriage, and I was basically a housewife. And like none of my friends currently are in that situation, and they've never been in that situation. So like I don't really feel like they have any context from like their personal lived experience where they could give me advice there. So like I don't feel comfortable enough to like actually talk to them about that particular subject. But there's other things like emotionally that I go through that I do feel like I should talk to them about this, because like they might understand, and more often than not they've had something like really useful information to say about the topic that has been like helpful to me in my real life. So maybe I'll write some aspects of that down. So I said the lack of meaningful connections or community. First of all, like after you identify what you're going through, who would understand and empathize. So who in your phone, who in your network could you reach out to say like, I'm going through this? And then also, I mean, you have to even be in a space, like, I'm just gonna read what was actually written down again. Layers before support. So what a member of the trans community was trying to explain to me is that like some people are going through so much and they are so traumatized that they are not even in a space where they can mentally say, I need help, or identify what it is that they're going through, because there's so many different things that they're going through all at the same time. That is very interesting. Like, and it's also very hard. I feel like a person in that particular situation, there needs to be some entry point. Like, clearly there's a lot of stuff happening. In some ideal world, there could be like hours and hours and hours of unpacking that could happen, that could help that person like talk through all the stuff that's going on and get them to a place where they can say, okay, there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and I'm going through all these things, and I need support and help with all of these things. But like the conversation has to start. And then the person who's like on the listening end of the conversation has to be able to like empathize. And then ideally they would be able to even provide them with like support. So I feel like one thing that's like super important when thinking about that is making sure that you have someone on the other end of the phone who actually cares, right? Let's write that down. So after you've identified, and maybe like, what does it even look like to identify that you're going through trauma? What does it look like to ID trauma? Right? Like, does it just mean you feel sad? What if you feel sad every day? You're just like a sad kid. So then, I mean, that doesn't feel abnormal. So why would you have new words or some new pinpoint that would make it so that like you would say something or do something that's like out of the ordinary if you're sad every day? Maybe like, what do abnormal feelings feel like? So something also that I found to be useful from going to therapy 3 times a week is sort of the stability and comfort that comes from doing something repeatedly for a long period of time, like developing a routine. Maybe we are having a focus group where we talk to multiple members of the trans community and allies, specifically community organizers, about what the issues are that are happening in that community. What if we started to unpack like describe to me what a normal day looks like for you, right? If there's nothing else that I've learned from school, it's that like schedules and routine do like lead to growth, right? So if your life is so hectic that you're not able to maintain any sort of schedule at all, I mean, that's a red flag. Like, that's a problem. Like, how are you going to move forward? How are you going to like get anything done? I guess you'd be living like every single day by the seat of your pants. Like all the days? That's nuts, right? I guess I'm actually starting to, as I say this, I'm starting to realize that I have noticed that in communities of color, routine is like not routine. Like there are so many like sporadic days. It's kind of like the weekend comes, like what are you gonna do? I don't know, you know, as opposed to being like my weekend comes, like on Saturdays I play soccer in the morning. On Sundays now I go to Yenny's dance class. Those are things that happen. Or the house cleaner comes on Sundays, right? It's like there's all of these, there's these things that are happening like regularly, and like I know they're coming. I know I'm like looking forward to them, or if nothing else, like, you know, they're a part of like my rhythm. And a part of like most of the things, I'm kind of like minimal in terms of like I don't really do more things than are like needed for me to do, unless I really want to, or I'm really interested. I am really interested in a lot of things, but that's another story. So I wonder if a person who's even under really severe trauma could get down to the basics. Like when you wake up in the morning, how do you get your breakfast, right? Like that's a start. What's another one? What is the first thing that you do when you wake up in the morning? What do you do before you go to sleep at night? What else? What do you do for leisure? What are your leisurely activities? Okay, so I have a list here. I have a list here of questions, things that like you might be able to talk about if you had some sort of routine and you understood what a normal day looks like. I'm guessing someone who's living in like extreme poverty, like if they're living in a tent or something, like you might not have a routine or a normal day, especially if you don't have a regular 9-to-5 job. So that's interesting to think about. There's another question around access. Like, I have some notes here around how a lot of trans members are afraid to go to the gynecologist because of like intimidation. I'm just gonna write that word down. This is specifically related to like the gynecologist. I wonder if another question that would be useful to bring up would be like, how do you build trust with your care providers? Just like in general, what does it look like to have a trusting relationship with a care provider? Even if you don't have one right now, like ideally. So I think I didn't talk about it, but I did share that Mara had it was like an Instagram live where she talked about her experience finding a therapist. Her parents like forced her to go into therapy, and then she realized like she actually liked the therapy, but that the therapist, well, she didn't like the therapy because the therapist, both of them on two separate occasions, like her parents found her a therapist, but these were like white women, and they couldn't like identify with her struggles as like a biracial girl. And there was too many like cultural differences that she had to like contextualize, and it made it so the whole experience of therapy was like negative. And so she stopped going for like quite a few years, and I think like she's just now even considering getting back into it. So I thought that was interesting. Like personally, both of my therapists have been white women, but they are really great. Like my primary therapist just had a baby, so she's on maternity leave, but covering her, I've been working with this woman named Chloe, and she's really great too. But also I think it makes a difference because my therapists are millennial white women. I feel like they're just a little bit more culturally sensitive, and they've been around more, like they've grown up being around more people of color. Maybe this is just because they're in the Bay Area, but I do realize like a lot of times when people are complaining about like the white therapists that they have when they are people of color, they seem to be like older white women who tend to be problematic. Probably older white men too, but I don't know, because actually my psychiatrist is an older white dude. It could be because he's gay that he's nice, I'm not sure, but he's actually not that bad either. That is something to think about though, because we definitely did talk about BetterHelp and what Talkspace, basically some of those like talk therapy apps. For some reason, they don't hire very many people of color and almost no members of the trans community, so it's really hard for members who do get on the platform who identify with those groups to find a therapist who can relate on a personal level. So that's interesting. What else? I don't know why I wrote down organ donation. I don't know where that comes in. I don't know. Talked about that. We talked about housing support already. Oh, this is interesting. I will call this being deserving of dignity. So what I mean by that is like, and I feel like I've seen this actually a lot in the Black community, like people who live in dilapidated housing and they like complain all the time about like shitty landlords, but then they like stay and just, I mean, I get it, like however much money you have. Like I have a friend now who's searching for an apartment, and I was trying to give her all these tips that I used, and she was basically saying, I can't use your tips because like you have more money than me, so therefore like you can just basically like buy away your problems. Now I kind of think that's true, because like, yeah, my landlord or my apartment manager, she's pretty great. Every time there's an issue, she responds in like 2 hours and like actually fixes it in like 2 hours every time. And I've emailed her at like 11 p.m. all types of night. Like I thought having an apartment would be the worst given some of the stories that I've heard, but I guess there's just really a difference in apartment management when you are wealthier than when you are more poor. And maybe it's like, even, you know, thinking about like the apartment that I live in is owned by a corporation. The apartment that my friend is looking at, they're owned by individuals. So there's like one dude who like owns 4 apartments, and then she's trying to rent from one individual. Like there's a company that owns the building that I live in, but they own multiple buildings. And so like my apartment manager, she also manages other buildings. So there's like systems in place to like take care of things that are broken. Whereas one individual, they aren't operating like a corporation. So especially when you're thinking about like fixing things, they might not have like tools and platforms. Like for instance, even in my building, we have like what is it, like digital washing. So you just have an app that you use to pay to like wash your clothes. And then like now we have, what is it, butterfly mix, where you use the intercom to like buzz in, and then I can just like tap, and then it alerts my phone that I have a visitor, and then I just like tap, and then that's how I like let the visitor into the apartment like that. And so I feel like, yeah, probably like an individual who owns an apartment building with like 6 units, they're not gonna have that. So yeah, sorry. What else? Oh, so where did I put the notes? So what I was saying though, in dignity in housing, that some like members of, well, this is what one of our group members pointed out, like some people probably don't realize that they are like deserving of dignity, so they believe that like their dilapidated housing is like acceptable. I mean, that's awful to say. Just imagine believing that that was true. Like, you deserve to live somewhere that has like mold or like, you know, a leaking roof or something like that. You know, like people really live like that. Like I have a couple of friends who have complained about that. Like, oh, my landlord wouldn't fix this. My landlord wouldn't fix that. It's like, are you kidding? Then you shouldn't pay the rent and you should move the fuck out. But maybe like, I don't know. I feel like paying rent is the worst. But if you're gonna pay rent, like you might as well be somewhere where they're actually gonna like fix your shit when it's broken. Otherwise, what are you paying rent for? That's their responsibility, like by law, right? Ugh, anyway, I don't know. What else have I got? Also on the point of housing, this is funny because it's got soup on it. If you were looking for a nice apartment, I think we're advertised in the soup shop. So move out of your parents' home, millennials. You're trying to like grow up and be pseudo adults here, so you too should take the leap and move out of your parents' home, because we can't mooch off of them forever. Or at least you can only mooch off of them until they cut you off, like mine did. Then one day you'll have to grow up and get a job. You know, also, okay, side note, I watched like School, or what is it, House of Rock the other day. And it was basically about those like middle-aged people. They're not middle-aged, they're like 30-somethings. But, you know, they're like living in the shared housing and they're all working the like jobs. But there's like 4 people in an apartment. And I feel like, fuck that, slit my wrist now. I'm not sharing an apartment with 4 people. Roommates? Are you fucking kidding me? No. God, I literally lived in Alvin in like a 5-bedroom house and we could barely share that shit. It's too much. I need my own space. I feel like I know for sure I'm gonna be the person who just stays alone forever, and I'm fine with that. I will make these AI tutorial videos for years. There's like 100 more to come. Oh, that's adorable. Seriously. Oh. Oh my God. Did you just stop? Okay, so I had to take a side note. These 2 cute dogs, they just ran right past and started kissing each other. It was incredible. Hi. Oh yeah. What's his name? Duke? He won't come. He left. Duke. Well, Duke came for a minute, but he had to go eat his grass, so he's gone. Maybe he'll come back. What else have I got? I think I'm just gonna bring up shame, and honestly, let's start a new. We're just gonna start a new page. So I wrote down all the questions that we talked about here, but I'm gonna start a whole new page. That's kind of around shame, because I feel like where I was going with the dilapidated housing is kind of where I'm going with the shame and the talk space and the meaningful connections, right? Because if you feel like nobody wants to be the person who's like, I don't have friends. Like, I'm the person who, like, literally, I think I have like everyone on the East Coast, like, their number in one of my phones. But that doesn't mean I'm actually gonna reach out to these people when I need help. Even people who are like my best friends. Like, literally, when I was going through shit, I just cut everybody off and I changed my number, and I was like, I'm not talking to anybody anymore. I'm just gonna like go move to some small town and just start a new life. Like, that was my whole plan. And I actually did have like friends with meaningful relationships, and I still felt like, nope, what I'm going through is just too embarrassing. I do not want to talk about it with anyone, and I would rather suffer in silence. So just imagine if you didn't even have like real friends or meaningful relationships. You seriously might not want to talk to anybody about something that's going on, especially like if there's shame. Shame is the fucking worst. And just imagine if you live in a tent, you don't have any money, like your family cut you off, and you're trans, and you're supposed to like talk to someone about all that shit. Like, that's heavy. That's so fucking heavy. Like, I can't even imagine. I cannot imagine. It's a lot. It's a lot. I don't know. I wonder, like, let's start with blue. We're just gonna put it in the middle and then start to like think about all of the other feelings that you might feel in relation to the shame that might make it so that like you won't speak up, you won't talk about what the actual issue is that's going on in your life. Okay, in the middle, we've got shame. I got the low battery announcement, so I feel like I've got 5 more minutes of recording, then this shit is gonna shut off. So here we go. Maybe you feel embarrassed. I think I'm just getting cold. You might feel sad. I'm gonna put loss. Like, you might feel like you might lose what you have now. Like, even if you have shallow relationships, if those shallow you might feel like if you bring too much to this shallow relationship, it will just like crack the stem that's barely there, you know? Like, my friends are gonna judge me so hard if I see this. Then they're gonna leave me if I say this. I felt like that, honestly. I was like, I can't tell anybody about Alvin. If they fucking knew about Alvin, they'd be like, this hoe. I mean, I didn't think that. I was just so ashamed. Like, why would I even be with a person like that? Why would I think that that was a good idea? I'm so stupid. But I guess that doesn't give myself a chance for growth, or even to like admit, you know, parts that aren't like human too. Like, everyone fucking makes mistakes. Like, you might be in a bad relationship, but that doesn't mean that you're like an awful person. You can grow from that. What else? You might feel anger. You could feel isolation. to get the feelings wheel. I'm gonna have to get the feelings wheel. Once I get the feelings wheel, then from the feelings wheel, I'm gonna point out like what are all the feelings that are super tangential to shame that might like lead you toward shame. All right, kids, this is gonna die. That's all we've got for today.